Welcome. I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. I hope you have your notepad and your pen handy because I want you to take notes. I want you to make a commitment that you will jot down some sort of action item that you can implement in your business today. That's what this is all about, implementation to drive your business forward. You know, a number of years ago, I endeavored to create a system, a mechanism with my team through which we could always make sure that we were giving one another fair value. And what I mean is, in any employment situation, there are situations in which people feel A, fairly compensated, B, unfairly compensated, as in they feel that they are not making as much as they are contributing, or C, unfairly compensated. Nobody actually feels C, where C may be from the other perspective, where the employer is feeling like maybe he's overcompensating a particular member of the team. And I remember while I was going through this and I was studying this, I was looking to the economic gurus and trying to come up with a system where we could always make sure dynamically at any point in time that people were being fairly compensated for their contributions, and that both the organization as well as the individuals within the organization, within the employment community of that company, were always being compensated and always getting fair value for their contributions. And we referred to that as Commensurate Value Exchange. That's the term I came up with at that time, and we use this to this day constantly. In fact, we've got this on our website in the section where we discuss our values. Bickert Management wants to make sure that we engage in Commensurate Value Exchange. I haven't given up on this notion. I remember describing this to a colleague of mine, actually a friend who had attended about a year-long general management program that I was in, and I was describing to him some of my ideas, but the gist of it, once again, was to have Commensurate Value Exchange, to make sure that we were fairly compensating our people and that they always felt fairly compensated, and that we also, in turn, felt that we were getting good value for our money in terms of what we were compensating them. And he replied that, sort of good luck with that. If you were able to solve that, you will have really solved a major problem throughout the world. And I was taken aback because I didn't think this as such a real monumental problem to solve, I guess is the way I would word it. I thought of it as something that should be necessary. And I would say that we did not succeed in implementing what I had intended to do. So today I want to talk to you about Commensurate Value Exchange and describe that and make sure that even though you may argue, well, this is a pipe dream and you'll never actually get it, I would say, in fact, the opposite may be true. It may be inherent in every financial or economic exchange already. And we should understand what it means. We should understand the ways that people engage in the economy. And, I always say that people act in their own self-interest, and we understand that. If you accept that, then we can sort of explore this concept, flesh it out, and make sure that your business is taking advantage of the natural laws of economics and how things work. Now, when I say that my experiment at that time failed, I guess what I mean is that we were unsuccessful in creating this dynamic situation in which on any given day, at any given time, a person would be contributing and receiving within a specific time period. Commensurate value exchange. There would be a fair exchange. There, of course, would be times where some people may be lazy and they may be getting compensated more than their contributions for that day or whatever, but we looked at it on a monthly basis, and that's really what I was trying to accomplish. So I would say we weren't able to do that. And the second thing is this concept where that people will always feel, both sides of the transaction will always feel that it's fair. And that can be somewhat dynamic, and that solving the dynamic nature of economics is the difficult part of this. So if what I'm talking about right now is sort of you're losing interest already, stick with me. This is a really important concept, and you will find. Think about this, because I'm presenting this to you, and the anecdote that I shared was within the context of the employee-employer relationship in human resources. But any economic exchange should have, or I will now argue, that inherently has commensurate value exchange to it. And that means that both parties must have, and this is the key, the perception that they are actually getting the better deal. So when we talk about commensurate value exchange, and we could also talk in terms of win-win and a balanced or fair transaction, but in reality, what is going on in every economic transaction is that each party assumes that he is getting the better deal. That is to say, if I engage in an economic transaction with you, I will only do so insofar as I perceive that I'm winning the transaction. That is, what I'm giving you, in my mind, is worth less to me than what I'm getting back from you. That's what economic exchanges are. Similarly, you will only engage in that transaction if what you think that you're getting from me is, in your perception, is worth more than what it is you're giving me. If it wasn't the case, neither one of us would transact. If I thought I was giving you more than what I was getting back, I wouldn't transact. Now, there would be an exception, and that could be in the case of charity. You might say, okay, well, what about, Michael, in terms of benevolence? In fact, we could define benevolence as someone knowingly contributing in an economic exchange more than the financial value of what they perceive they're getting back. That is charity. I knowingly give you more than what I think I'm getting in exchange. But the caveat there is that whatever value I'm assigning to the benevolence, to the charity, is what makes it commensurate. In other words, I get a feeling of doing the right thing. I'm supporting a worthy cause or whatever. So maybe the financial aspect of what I'm receiving from you is less than what I'm giving. Therefore, I'm being charitable. But I am still getting a balanced win-win commensurate exchange because I'm doing it because I feel that there's something else I'm getting out of it. Maybe not financially. There's a good feeling. I'm doing something that helps my community or helps society, helps a particular person, and I get a good feeling from that. So that's where charity would fit into this mix. And still, therefore, inherent even in charity is a commensurate value exchange. If you don't feel that you're getting at least as much back as you're giving, you won't transact. And in fact, as I've said, philosophically, your tendency is to only trade when you think that what you're giving away is worth less to you than what you're getting back. Also, in every economic exchange, each participant is a willing or voluntary participant, necessarily. They have to be. You have to be willing and or you have to voluntarily engage in the exchange. That's how a free market works. You have your free will, you voluntarily participate in the exchange, and you do so because you feel it's a win for you. Everyone acts in his own self-interest. So we don't need a whole bunch of regulation. We don't need a central authority to plan all this because we're going to act in our own self-interest. And that's what regulates this. You can't possibly know what my perception of value is any more than I can know what your perception of value is. Now, we have an inkling. We understand that certain things create more value and so on. However, we don't know the exact degree to which somebody values something. And that's what pricing is all about. And so we price things and we trade and we exchange and we experiment with that until we get to the area where a person, we may need to, and I said experiment, but negotiate until we get to a point where a person says, yeah, that works for me. Now, there are some times, again, if you were pushing back on this, you would say, well, Michael, there are some times where people engage and they don't feel that they're winning. They feel that they're losing the exchange. And I would ask, well, then why are they exchanging? What I would say in that case is you might feel like you've overpaid for something, but what you do then is you are assigning value to another part of the transaction. For example, you might feel like you've overpaid for something, but you go, but it's a good cause. That's that charity or benevolence part of thing. Or you might say, I'm supporting a local business. I know I could have got this cheaper from one of the major players. I could have got this cheaper on Amazon or something like that, but I feel good about supporting this local business. Or we sometimes assign value when we think that we're getting the better of the exchange and that it's not a fair exchange. We don't feel like we are necessarily ripping off the vendor. We might say, okay, well, yeah, he gave me a really good price. I really beat him up on price. I'm sort of, proverbial stealing the item. But what we do is we justify, just like the business owner might justify, we say, but they're picking up a good customer. I'll be a repeat customer, and over the long term, he'll make his money back and it'll be a good exchange. We understand, you've gone through these thought processes, we understand that it has to be a commensurate value exchange. It has to be balanced, it has to be fair. So as I thought this through, and I don't think there's a scenario in which it's not balanced. We are always balancing it. And if it's not a financial thing, like if the amount of money I'm giving is more than what I think I'm getting back in exchange in terms of goods, products, or services, there's that thought process I have. There's a reason for that. I'm being benevolent, or in some way I justify it in my mind to proceed with the transaction. I justify it and say, well, this is good for my health. So, I'm paying a lot for this, but really good for my health. So we make up for that. We justify that in some way. When that happens, that is symptomatic of the other party, let's say the vendor, the business, not doing a good enough job of communicating their unique value proposition to us. Now, this is, again, we're splitting hairs, and I hope I'm not losing you here, but if I engage in the transaction, you might say, well, they communicated their value proposition well enough that you converted, you became a customer. Yes, but if I didn't feel good about it. So let's talk about, like, in the case that there's buyer's remorse, or cold feet, or some kind of change of heart. Really what that is that's a change in the perception. So there's an understanding here that it's about perception. Both parties or both participants in any economic exchange have a perception. And when the buyer party, when either of the parties regret the decision to engage in that exchange, that's simply about a change in perception. The moment that the transaction went through, it felt good. And so again, I'm talking more philosophical today, but you should be able to extract these concepts and apply them in the context of your business. So I gave an example a moment ago where your marketing, your communication of your value to people is going to affect whether they feel their perception is they're getting more back, that they're winning the transaction. And the degree to which you can communicate effectively your unique value proposition, you're going to do a better job of being able to engage in commerce. In other words, you're going to generate more sales. You're going to convert more leads. Now, a moment ago, I mentioned that you don't need any sort of central authority or regulatory body to try to govern this. People acting in their own self-interest will do this. This is exactly what Adam Smith described in Wealth of Nations. It's not the benevolence of the butcher or the baker or the brewer. It is every man acting in his own self-interest that guides the economy. And I think that may be where I was a little naive in thinking I could solve this problem in the context of the employer-employee relationship and commensurate value exchange, because I would have to be omniscient. I would need to know everything. And you can't do that. That's what central authorities fail in understanding. It doesn't matter how noble or well-intended you are. You may have good intentions, and yet there's unintended consequences. So while I was trying to solve that riddle and engage in or create a mechanism through which everyone would always feel fairly compensated, I was being a bit of a central authority. I will say, though, in fairness to myself, I sort of understood that. Well, I did understand that. And what I was trying to do is make it a free market economy type scenario. And that's where it became very difficult, because it's so against what people were used to doing. Most people in an employment situation. So again, I'm using an example today about employment and human resources. So in the context of human resources, we typically would pay an hourly wage or a monthly or annual salary, and people are used to trading time for dollars. But what's becoming increasingly more popular is outsourcing and freelance work and that kind of thing, where people are completing a task for a certain amount of money. And that's where commensurate value exchange becomes really viable. That's where the concept that I was trying to enact so many years ago becomes very valid. It's because nobody would do that. Nobody would agree to take on a task and do something unless he thought that the amount that he was getting paid for it is less than what he's trading back, is more valuable than what he's trading back, which is his time, his effort, his specialized knowledge, whatever it takes to complete the task. So think of this in every economic transaction you have, whether you're in a relationship with the employer, an economic relationship with your employer, your employee, or with your customer. We all need to perceive that what we are giving away, whether it's the dollars or the product or the service, is less than what we're getting back, is less valuable. And the key is the perception. And so much of perception comes back to communication, and what we call communication as it relates to your products or services are communicating the value is marketing. So hopefully you're putting some of these pieces of the puzzle together, and why terms like commensurate value exchange, which I use freely, I use very frequently, are so important to philosophically understand and wrap your head around, because they will influence what you should do to be an effective manager, to be effective as a business owner, entrepreneur. Since I said that everyone is necessarily a willing or voluntary participant in these exchanges, and we don't need central authorities or regulatory bodies to govern these things, then I think it's important for me to support that with a few examples. So that's why the concepts of minimum wage don't make sense. They don't work. By putting a minimum wage in place, you are effectively eliminating people from being able to willingly engage in commerce with somebody that voluntarily wants to exchange services. So if somebody wants to exchange their time for less money than what the law says is the minimum that they can be paid, that person is now unemployable. That person, if they don't think that what they're giving up, their time in this example, is worth as much as what the central authority has said is the minimum that they can receive, the central authority has said you are unemployable. So again, it may be well intended. We think of these things as if that there is no voluntary participation in this. And if you think of it from the employer's perspective, the employer is going to have to look for somebody, if the employer, the business, is going to follow minimum wage laws, which of course, if they're laws they have to follow, then what they're going to do is they're going to look for people who will be able to give more value back. So maybe that person is much more experienced, has much more education, has something more valuable than someone else that they might otherwise employ. And that's why so often minimum wage is described as hurting the very people that they're trying to help. We tend to think of the people that are applying for minimum wage jobs as being unskilled workers or very young people, inexperienced, and that kind of thing, oftentimes immigrants and this sort of thing, and we put these minimum wage in laws with the intention of helping those people, but in fact we hurt them. we make it so that they can't get employment because the person who has to pay that amount of money is now going to look for somebody who offers more value in exchange. Otherwise, they just have to raise their prices to their customers and we're all hurt once again. Another example is bailouts, is when a government or a central authority decides they're going to bail out the so-called businesses that are too big to fail. We all need to rely on these. All of these things don't make sense. Price controls, another example, are subsidies that you've heard about. There's some sort of agricultural subsidies where maybe sugar producers or corn producers are paid far more than what the product is even worth. All of these things are skewing and distorting the actual market. And we need to back off and allow people to voluntarily participate in exchanges. And so much of what you hear of when things don't make sense and people are getting hurt and everything, and we don't have hours to talk about today, is when central authorities, as well intended as they may be, come in and they skew and distort free market principles and economic principles. Willing participants with commensurate value exchange is the only way this will work. What I'm describing to you is not controversial, and in fact, it's inarguable, even though so many people seem to argue this or seem to not understand this. What I want you to do as a manager, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, is accept this, research it more and more. If you need a lot more time to spend on this beyond what we have to talk about today, then invest that time. I have other videos where I talk about this, and certainly start with Adam Smith. And there's lots of economists out there who describe this. Not Keynesian economists. Most of these are Austrian economists who will talk about free market economies and how things naturally work according to the natural way that human beings interact. And that's what really drives an economy. Why this is so important for you to understand is you're running a business and you want things to go according to the flow of the natural order of things, and you don't want to push against those things. So you have to understand these things on a philosophical basis. Otherwise, you will fail to align objectives within your organization or align objectives with the various stakeholders. So you will be pushing against the natural order of what your customer wants to do. You'll be going against the flow naturally of what your employees want to do. And that's just a bad thing. That makes you ineffective as a manager, and you will not be as successful. I want you to understand that all economic exchange is made possible by each participant's greater access to the resources that he's leveraging for production and contributing to the exchange. Now, it's sort of a mouthful, but wrap your head around that. Is if I have greater access to financial capital, if I have greater access to currency than you do, and you have greater access to produce a particular product or service than I do, then it would be natural that we'd probably be able to exchange, because you would therefore want my currency more than what you want for your product or service, because you have great access to that. You have it in abundance. So each participant willingly trades for that thing which is more scarce and therefore more valuable to him. So if your product, maybe it is great grass-fed beef, or it may be a particular type of healthcare that you provide or whatever, is easily accessible for you, and you have that in abundance, and I don't have that, I want that. I want the solution to the problem that I have in my life. Maybe it's hunger, maybe it's a sore back, or some pain, or some sort of malady that needs to be cured. So, but I have access to currency, and you're like, well, I'd like to have some of your currency, and I have this great specialized knowledge, or I have a lot of resource to be able to produce this product or service. We will naturally engage, because each of us will have the perception that the other has something of greater value. Understand that philosophically. This might sound very obvious, but I see so many people behaving in ways that they don't seem to understand this. That, they embrace corporatism or crony capitalism, where they want central authorities to come and skew and distort the market through regulation. Oh, we need more rules about this. Or they engage in rent-seeking behavior in which they try to limit competition. And I've described in other videos where I've been there and done that. I've been in those situations. I've been in boardrooms on Capitol Hill talking with big lobbying organizations and trying to wrap my head around the whole concept and why they do what they do, and I philosophically disagree with it. But I'm telling you, I only philosophically disagree with it because I act in my own self-interest, and what I see people doing is not acting in what I think would be their self-interest, or they're skewing everything, and philosophically it becomes wrong and now becomes about essentially egalitarian outcomes and redistribution of wealth, stealing from one person to give to another. All of those things, they fail, and they lead to a lot of economic tumult and a lot of downturn in the economy and people getting hurt. So, again, I digress. I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent there, but it's really important to embrace these things. And mostly, if you are an entrepreneur, you already do this. If you're an aspiring manager, it's really critical that you understand this. All comes back to commensurate value exchange. So ask yourself, in your business, what do you have great access to? What do you have in abundance? Is it capital? Is it financial resources? Is it facility? Is it specialized knowledge? Do you have labor capital? Do you have great team members that can be put to work and can produce particular things? Those things that you have in abundance, that you have easy access for, and you can leverage those resources for the greatest return, that's going to give you greater value that you can exchange, most likely in today's day and age, for currency that someone else has. So someone else cannot produce the items, the products or services that you can. That's where the value is created. So I know you know this, but think about it and ask yourself, do you ever brainstorm this and go, you know what, we do have, in abundance, we have this particular raw material over here, or we have time, we have space, whatever it may be. What do you have that you can leverage? What do you have in abundance that someone else might find is scarce, and therefore they're willing to trade with you? Since at the beginning of every video, I like to remind you that the objective is to improve your management skills and grow your business. Let's talk about, okay, what do we do to be very effective managers? How can we grow our business with this concept of commensurate value exchange? So we've already said we trade what we have in abundance for those things that we perceive as greater value, that may be more scarce for us, and it may be currency as an example. That's typically what we trade for in business. What we then do is we leverage the proceeds of that economic exchange to increase our capacities and our production. So if I had something in abundance that was of value in the marketplace because it was scarce to others, and then I exchange with them, I take what they've given me and now I leverage that new resource, say currency, to create more of what I have been able to create. So I will reinvest in my business is another way to say it. I need to reinvest in those raw materials that it takes for my production to expand my capacities. So those people who are most effective in business are really good at doing this. They take whatever resource they gain from exchange, from commensurate value exchange, they take it and they reinvest it, they risk it, and they reinvest it to create more of the same. Ineffective people squander what they receive in an economic exchange. So you might think of people who are financially irresponsible. Those people they don't have an abundance of something and they trade that away for something that they want right now. The old marshmallow experiment. It's like, I don't have any propensity for holding out for long-term gains. I need immediate gratification. And so I make the mistake of trading away something that's more valuable because it's not in my mind. In my mind, I perceive something that's going to give me instant gratification, some sort of indulgence right now. I take that and I squander it. Now, there's nothing wrong with engaging in commerce for an indulgence, some sort of luxury item you're rewarding yourself with. But even then, effective people, effective managers, they only do that insofar as they know they can leverage that for greater return on their investment. So you might say, oh, really? Like, I don't follow that. Well, let's say I engage in trade for a very luxurious vacation. I do that knowing that that is a reward that motivates me to do that. Like once a year, I'm gonna, if I have been successful, I'm gonna take that luxury vacation. Also, it recharges my batteries, and I know that's an important thing. I gotta sharpen the saw, I gotta let my mind unwind and everything. So you can see the idea here is that even an indulgence, even a luxury item to those people who are very effective, they look at that as an investment, a reward and motivation, an investment in motivation, an investment in recharging or sharpening the saw, as my examples there. But those people who are always looking for instant gratification have a tendency to trade away things. They will put a lower value in their mind, in their perception. They'll have a lower value on those important things that lead to long-term gains because it doesn't necessarily result in some sort of indulgence today. And we can understand that. You all know somebody who maybe doesn't have very ample financial means, but as soon as they get $1 in their pocket, as my dad used to say, it's burning a hole in your pocket. And they go out and they spend that immediately. And it's like, well, why did you do that? You could have invested that. You were saying that you needed this. And of course, $1 is nothing. But you get the idea, the proverbial dollar burning a hole in the pocket. So somebody comes into some sort of money, whether through an exchange of some sort, or maybe even a windfall, and they blow the money. They squander that resource. That's what ineffective people do. Effective people leverage that, reinvesting and risking. I want to make that point clear. It's risky to reinvest in your business, but effective people do it effectively. People, they do it wisely. They look for the best return on investment within their business. They increase their capacities. So think of this, and that's again why it's flawed logic. So people are like, oh, the rich aren't paying their fair share. That's all garbage. The stats don't bear that out. And in terms of income tax and all that stuff, I don't want to go into a big tangent on that, but the rich are paying more than their fair share in that regard as well. But what I'm really getting at here is the idea that there should somehow, that capitalism somehow nefariously produces wealth. That is all flawed logic, because it is that these effective people, these entrepreneurs like yourself, effective managers, are taking resources and they are delaying gratification for themselves. They are not squandering it, and they are reinvesting in the means of production, in hiring people, and that's risky to do. And they're investing in equipment and expanding their capacity in some way. And all that risk, when it pays off, they continue to do that perpetually. You get into this cycle of doing that little by little to grow the business, and that's what you need to be doing. So when we talk at the beginning of the video about growing your business, that's why this all comes back down to commensurate value exchange and philosophically understanding how this works. If you stayed with me this far, I thank you for bearing with me. I know that for many people, philosophy and these more broad general concepts are not as interesting, and you just prefer that I specify what do I need to do specifically to drive my business forward, what can I do today. And really, that's not my thing. What I like to do is try to engage in topics and discussions of the things that affect everyone, that we all will benefit from understanding and knowing that. And why I do that is that's what has benefited me so much as I've learned these concepts, and then I just sort of analyze and I sit back and think. Remember, I talked to you about most of good management takes place between the ears. It's in your head. You have to spend your time thinking and analyzing how to drive your business forward. And what really helps that is solid first principles, solid philosophy, understanding things like commensurate value exchange. So in today's discussion, I hope what you'll do for your homework assignment is ask yourself, okay, well, maybe you're going to brainstorm on your notepad, who are all the various stakeholders with whom I engage in some sort of economic transaction. Now, I talked about your customers being the most obvious one, and also your staff, your employees, or those vendors with whom you outsource. Think about those people as well and ask yourself, what is it that you're doing? First of all, are you communicating the value of your end of the exchange better in some way? And so I'll just give you a quick example for employment. Are you marketing the benefits of working for your company? And then secondly, of course, with marketing, I don't have to elaborate what you need to do with your customers. That's a separate discussion altogether. But you need to market your end of any exchange. You need to communicate so that the person on the other side understands it. And to the degree that you don't have that much value to offer, then that's where you got to spend your time on creating more value. Remember, everything comes back down to creating value and communicating that value. And so think about this in terms of commensurate value exchange. That's how you're going to get the best, by making sure that people perceive what they're getting from you to be very great compared to what they're giving you, whether it's their time or their money, whatever they're trading and exchanging with you. And then once you understand that and you've sort of brainstormed all those transactions, ask yourself, where am I lacking a little bit of value? How can I contribute that? Maybe value as an employer is where you're lacking things. And or maybe as a customer for your vendors, you might say, well, it's the money I'm giving them, but there's more than that a vendor looks for. I want you to brainstorm these things and then figure out how you can make sure that you are getting, you are trading and making sure that you're giving away what you have in abundance, and then leveraging that which you get in return to the greatest degree possible so that you can reinvest it in your business, grow your capacities, and grow your business. Boy, as I sit here, I can just keep thinking of a whole bunch of things. I'd love to engage in a conversation, a two-way conversation with somebody about this, because that's where real value comes out. And I hope you got something out of this, even though it's a one-way conversation, and you'll take the time to explore how you can implement these ideas in your business, commensurate value exchange, and you don't ever want to engage in this disproportionate idea where it's win-lose or lose-win. You always want to look for that fair balance, but I'm saying it inherently is going to happen. Otherwise, you won't engage in the commerce. So if you find yourself getting stuck, I'm not able to hire people, I'm not able to negotiate for value in my product, it's either the value or it's your communication of the value, your marketing, your being able to influence people and their perception. I could keep going on, I'm rambling at this point. So I want to leave it at that today. I hope you got something out of this. Remember, there's a link in the description if there's a concept you want me to cover in greater detail, more specific to your industry, to your business. Go ahead and click on that link, and then you can anonymously have me cover a concept. Now, maybe you're not anonymous to me. I may know who you are, but you won't be known to all the people. I won't reveal anything proprietary about your business or you as I discuss this concept in a video. Other than that, I hope you can leave a comment, whether you push back on this, if you want me to elaborate on something, what commensurate value exchange stories, anecdotes, or comments do you want to leave? Leave something that we can all learn from, because we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.